All right, so first things first, whenever it comes to podcasting, there are a few different formats that you should know. And they're important because you're going to have to pick one. You're going to have to pick the best one for you, and that works with your time and your schedule. Those three different popular formats are either solo, so it's just you talking about what you know on a topic, duo, so it's you and a friend or you and a partner. You guys can riff off each other, you guys can talk back and forth, you guys can share more information, and then interview style. So this can either be with you or with you and a partner, and it's when you bring on outside people, outside experts in order to talk on topics. Now, all of these have their own pros and their own cons, so let's go over them a little bit in depth. If you are solo, if it's just you in the podcast talking, well, that is a great way to pump out lots of content. So, for example, let's say you decide you want to do a daily podcast like I did. Well, it's just you. So you can talk on the topics that you want. You can make hundreds of different topics, and it's just you. So you can sit down and you can do them every single day. You can batch do them. It is just you. So it's you pushing yourself to do it. That's not great, however, because you can't really share ideas with anybody. You can't bounce ideas off with anybody. You can't riff with anybody, and it's just your personality. So maybe the audience doesn't necessarily like your personality, which will happen. There will be some people who don't like your personality, and that's perfectly fine. That is okay. But if that does happen, if you have a partner, well, there's somebody else there who can fill in some of those weaknesses that you might have. So that leads us to the duo mindset. Having a partner is a great way to get more content out there. Now, it's a little bit more difficult in order to schedule you and your partner to have time to do this podcast together. You have to, figure out what works with your schedules. But that being said, you do have someone where you can bounce ideas off of. You do have a different personality who's on the show, brings their own informational light to the show. So that is a great way to also help engage the audience more, having more information between a second person and also having that second person's personality. And the final, most difficult, but also the most fulfilling and informational way to run a podcast is to bring on outside people to interview them. So let's say you have an expert who you are interviewing in the field of, I don't know. Now, when I have to think of one, it's hard to pick one out of the hat. Computers. Let's say you have an expert computer repairman. Well, that is going to reach out to those specific target people. You know that you're bringing a computer repair expert onto the show, so people are going to tune in, they're going to watch, they want to hear what this expert has to say in his field, and that's also great because you can leverage that expert's social media presence. So let's say you are brand spanking new to podcasting, but you manage to get Gary Vee onto your show. Well, you now have his audience who's interested in everything that he does, who's going to be watching your podcast. They can see your content. If they like your content, those are thousands of eyeballs that you did not have before and that you wouldn't have if you didn't leverage that guest's social media presence. That being said, this is one of the hardest possible interview formats to actually get because you have to be reaching out to guests. You have to be coordinating with their schedules. You might have to throw them some money, probably have to throw them some money, or at least give them something in return for coming on to your show. So this format, it is great. It does have some benefits, but it is a little bit harder to actually sustain and a little bit harder to get running and going at the very beginning of your actual podcasting career. Now, let me take a look at this. So the second thing that you're going to have to figure out is when you actually feel like posting. As they say, done is better than perfect. Don't ever think too much about getting your podcast perfect. It's never going to be perfect. That is impossible for us humans to perceive anything as perfect. There will always be something that we can work to fix. So done is much better than perfect. Get that content out to your audience. Get it in their hands. They're waiting and they want it. That being said, you have to figure out which posting schedule works best for you and the format that you've selected. Are you going to post weekly, meaning once a week, bi-weekly, so one podcast every 2 weeks, or are you going to post monthly? So one podcast per month. This also depends on the format and how you've decided to put out that podcast. So you can be doing a video podcast, which is just regular, same thing that you'd be doing for a podcast, but you do have video. That way you get to post it on YouTube, you get to post it on more sites. If you're just doing audio, it's a little bit easier because you don't have to worry about editing the video. You're just editing the audio. So this is all things that you have to think about. So what is the format of the show that you are going to select, and what is your posting schedule? The last thing that we're going to speak about on this class is the publisher that you choose. So a publisher is basically a large website that automatically pushes out your podcast to pretty much everywhere that you want. So Spotify, Apple Music, or Apple Podcasts now, Google Podcasts, things of that nature. A publisher will automatically push out your podcast to those specific websites once you upload it to them. Now, there are a plethora that you can choose from. There's Anchor, there's Podbean, there's a bunch of different publishers that you can possibly choose from. The differences depends on some research that you're going to have to do. I'll outline a few. I personally used Podbean. I love them. I think that they are great. The difference, one of the biggest differences that you're going to have to keep in mind is monthly fee. How much are you going to be paying to upload your content to this publisher so that they can push it out? And how many people are already on that platform? So, for example, Anchor and Podbean, they're not only publishers, but they also host your podcast. So if one has 1 million people looking for podcasts on that platform and one only has 100,000 people, that can also influence your decision. More people mean more potential eyeballs for your product. So always keep that in mind. The last route that you could possibly do is have it be a private podcast and go individually to each of the platforms such as Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and publish your RSS feed automatically that way or manually that way. That's going to take more time, but you're not going to pay the fees each month to one of the major publishers. Now, the issue with this concept is your website, unless you are already an influencer in some way, shape, or form, will not have automatic people coming to view your website for the podcast. So you're not going to be getting eyeballs that way, but you will be saving money every single month, not having to pay one of the major publishers. Now, not only are you saving money every single month, but you can also in turn get people to come to your website instead of going to one of those websites, with the added benefit of you gain more influence. You can host a store on your website. You can do a bunch of things on your own private personal website. So today we have talked about the different formats that you can use, the different posting schedules at your disposal, and the different publishers. Thank you for joining, and I will see you in the next one.